Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Post-pod?
That's a great idea. We should do that.
Yeah, I think it's time to do that.
Let's go. We're
Really,
recording, right?
we are, yeah.
We're actually recording.
Yeah, we're 100% we're actually recording. What a refreshing conversation with Esther. I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, same. It felt so much just like talking shop, like with
Totally.
a friend. Like, it was awesome.
Totally. For me, I felt like I was reminiscing the whole time. So, do you remember at the time when we just could do this? And now look at us. It was fantastic conversation. What a great guest.
It's good though to do those for a lot of reasons, but I think, like the reminiscing part, you kind of often, I feel like sometimes you get stuck in like what's happening right now and you forget where you came from.
Yeah.
So thinking about the perspective of where you're at now based on where you came from is helpful.
That's such a great point. I agree with you.
Because you just look at a snapshot, like a moment in time, and then you kind of lose the perspective and context of how you, like, why do we have teams that are structured the way we do?
Well, I think, great segue, Mark. But I think one of the things that
I tried to say, I've intentionally set you up for that. How's that?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that really stood out is like, have we gone into a time where there's an over specialization of a lot of the core roles that we have in marketing versus the generalization that used to exist, and we relied on the agencies and partners to kind of help marketing teams. And it was really interesting kind of getting into that insight where I kind of tend to agree with Esther on that. I think there's an undergeneralization of roles that could still likely work more in our favor than they do today.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I think it needs to be intentional. Like maybe it's, somebody covering brand. I don't know if you want that label in your organization or not, but generally, like, there needs to be somebody that's seeing everything and not just the individual things. It's like the forest and the trees idea, I guess.
I agree.
Yeah. Like the hammer and nail analogy, even. Like if all you have is Google search under your disposal, like the world's going to look like a search engine opportunity for you.
Totally. Yeah. And I think this is where making sure that you're still somewhat stay as current as possible in a lot of the different marketing tactics, rooting yourself like in things like the marketing effectiveness principles and things that can really help you remove a little bit some of those blinders that we have on from a day-to-day perspective that really then make us, if someone's a performance marketer, they're just looking at it from that one lens. When it's like, no, you need to make sure that you're creating that mental capacity to think at that 30,000 foot view and making sure that you're leaning on different tactics, understanding the weight of the entire marketing spend or all your media tactics and things to that effect. So, and I feel like that happens over time naturally as well as you progress in your career, but accelerate that. And I feel like that's where we can, be less specialized, a little more generalized to help really kind of build that ecosystem within an organization.
Yeah, even on the specialization front, the one thing that we talked about attribution models like last click, and there's this recurring thought that I keep having where, okay, so let's go down that path for a second. We used to like cookies, and you're going to replace third-party cookies with first-party data and all that kind of stuff, with the intention still of being in this position where I know my customers,
right,
en masse, one-on-one. And so you say that kind of stuff, and you're like, makes sense. Let's do that. More of that, which isn't a bad thing. But then we get to this point where we're also talking about to executive teams, we can do this. We can do these things. We can do one-on-one marketing.
Yeah.
And then I think we had this conversation before, but you go, okay, well, let's take the opposite of that. Hey, you got sun bright in your eyes, right? It's like the solar system just opened up on your face.
My God. Sorry.
Sorry for anyone listening. We just had this bright beam of sun just right on his eye.
Anyway.
Anyway, so you go down this path of like, okay, well, I'm going to specialize. We're going to do this. We can do one-on-one. We can target everyone. And then on the flip side of that, you go, well, let's maybe gut check this. Can we exclude one-to-one? Like, can I exclude this person from my targeting? And let's say it's the executive CEO of your company. See if they have ads that show up after you've excluded them. Because if you can do one-to-one targeting exposure, you should be able to not expose people one-to-one as well. So then there's like, you know what I mean? I think you have to be careful on the promises of these specializations that we have. And that's where I think it's important to think about generalization as well.
You opened up a can of worms right now, and I don't want to go too deep here, but I am so with you on this, Mark, because I look at the cookie deprecation as an opportunity. You know, when we think about being and leveraging your first party data and doing all these great things for a personalization perspective, a targeting perspective, all these great things that, you know, ad tech and martech really promise to you. At the end of the day, it goes back to if people have already shown intent in your product or service, your company, whatever, there's a good chance that you've already created a level of mental availability that they already know who you are, and they'll come find you when the time is right. So it's less about the retargeting, the remarketing side of things, you know? And that's where, like, I've done like a whole 180, truthfully, where how to make sure we prioritize things like reach instead, reach over frequency, right? You know, that was going back to one of our first podcasts with Dr. Nicole Hartnett, where she said, I think if you recall, she's like, if you have $2, you invest in 2 homes versus 1 home twice. And it's that kind of thinking where it's like, great, all the remarketing stuff, cool. You show higher conversion rates, great. They're still a fraction, by the way. Let's not get too excited about some of these conversion rates. Sound like it's a paradigm shift in targeting. However, building that mental availability for someone that isn't in consideration for your product or service right now has a lasting effect in your ability to continue to grow market share. Like it's really simple. It's really simple. I don't know.
I think that's the trees in the forest or the hammer and the nail analogy, where you just like, there's this thing in front of you and you're just obsessing about it, and you're letting Google or Facebook or Amazon or whatever the ad platform is tell you what is working. Like they're grading their own homework.
They're grading their own homework.
Of course it's great.
You have a 0.3% from a last click perspective on all other tactics, and your retargeting becomes 1%. Wow. Fire up the presses.
I hit a nerve there.
A little bit.
Sorry. I mean, it's going on the other side. Like Esther had a couple of really interesting points, especially with her experience at CIBC, the bank, and then P&G working there on brand stuff, the brand related side of things, and how I think she had talked about for everyday banking, like they went big on brand and not on lower funnel tactics, because you got to reach everybody. Like, who doesn't need a checking account?
Based on what we know today, isn't that the right thing to do anyways?
Yeah. It's interesting though, because you could see where this, like, all these tools are there in the last 10 years. All the tools are starting to say, well, we can do all these things really well. We can prove this really well. This is another one that gets me. Like, if we could prove this really well, well, now you open up the cameras. And another thing, but it's true. Like, why, 100 and whatever it was years ago, 120 years ago, Wanamaker said half my advertising is wasted. Trouble is, I just don't know which half. 10 years ago, Facebook goes public. We were using that just as a proxy for like digitization of retail or marketing departments. With the promise of we can measure everything. You still now 10 years later, coming up to 15 years later, after digitization, we can measure everything. are still having a whole bunch of people going, I still don't know which half of my marketing is working. Like, it's maybe you're not asking the right questions.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
More branding. More branding. More branding. More branding.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think there's a really interesting part about that from her perspective. And like, I think a P&G type of training, like the discipline that goes into how they do things is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that is based on reach. Like they start with reach. We talked about that with Mark Pritchard a couple of weeks ago. He's got a philosophy and that's baked into like the system that they have where it starts with reach. It doesn't start with anything else. Like it begins with reach and then, and from there, then you build out the rest of your campaign. So if you're not reaching everybody in your target market, you got to rethink why.
I agree with that. Is there anything else that stood out in our conversation for you with Esther?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things related to that, but just like we talked about hyper focusing on small things instead of like the big things. Like, I think that's, again, that generalization. In some ways, I kind of feel like, again, just the thought that I had since our conversation with Esther, but like, what if we just stopped using Google and Facebook to report on performance and started using like the bank account of the business and looking at things over time? You know, I think that was an interesting, it was a continuation of that idea. Also, the production requirements now and this content and supply chain of content within a marketing department is massive. It's huge.
It is. Yeah.
And it requires so much more for people to do. And because now we have like, you know, we could do anything and not just the flyers coming out once a week. You know, it's 5 pages. We have however many boxes. That's it. You know what I mean? Like it's infinite inventory. So now there's this massive pressure on marketing departments to be able to produce an infinite amount of inventory. It's tricky.
It is tricky.
How about you?
I think the way she ended the podcast, when we're talking a little bit around like marketing trends, what she sees really kind of shifting and changing, it was 3 things that she highlighted: accessibility of advertising. That whole part of it, I thought was an interesting take. Whole notion around marketing sustainability as well. And then finally, how do we become better on the cross-media side of measurement, right? I know a lot of people are leaning into MMNs, but I know there's a lot of other things that is happening there. So I feel like getting to a state where we are more conscious of the cross-media part of our investments, I think will help us do a lot more, help at least get closer to solving that Wanamaker dilemma, if anything.
Totally.
Yeah, I would say those 3 things stood out to me as well.
Totally. Yeah, I thought that was great. And the sustainability part is something that I've never really put a whole lot of thought into when it comes to the advertising and ad tech, but like it's a big deal. Like I think, and with AI, it's becoming even a bigger deal. And there's all kinds of stuff around that is really important. I think we should be thinking about, like, if oil and gas is being held to a standard, for anyone who doesn't know, we live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada has got lots of oil and gas. So it's a big thing here. It's a big conversation.
Yeah.
And it's an important industry, and there's a lot of pressure on them to improve and make bigger contributions to being more sustainable practices and investing in that kind of stuff. Totally. And I think it's true for marketing, but I've never really thought about it, to be honest with you.
No. And I think you're right. If you think about the computing power, like even if, let's just use Google and Facebook as an example, like the amount of computing power needed to do these optimizations in behind the scenes, the algorithms that are working behind the scenes, no one's really talking about that.
Yeah.
Right. And now you have AI coming in with their ability to generate creative or whatever. I think we should probably be a little bit more in tune of what we could be doing to help on that front as well.
Totally. Anyway, it was a really fun conversation. I thought it was great. It was really great to chat with Esther. It was nice.
Yeah. Very refreshing. Very refreshing. And it was her first podcast.
I know, and she did it amazing. She was awesome.
She crushed it.
Yeah,
Absolutely crushed it.
yeah, it was really good. I thought, yeah, she was. I would have sworn she's done that a whole bunch of times.
Me too. I think she's lying. There's no way she was that good. I've never done it before.
Anyway, that was really fun. Thanks, Esther, and thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Not you, V. I mean, you have to listen to me whenever I speak.
I'm here.
Anyway, so
awesome.
yeah, V.
Catch you in the next one.
Yeah, and
Your turn.
okay, let's go chase profitability.
Attaboy.
Let's do this thing.
Have an amazing day, my friend.
You too.